I wanted to start by saying, let's take a moment to talk a little bit about why healthy nutrition is so important. And I know we have our little chat box open there, and you all are welcome to join me. But if you remember the very first of these Wellness Wednesdays that we had with our virtual wellness rounds, I spoke about the 5 foundations of personal well-being. Can anybody name for me what those 5 are? And if so, just drop those into the chat as we're speaking. So I mentioned that there were five foundations of personal well-being. What are they? Let's rephrase that. What's one of them? Drop those into the chat. What is one of the 5 foundations of personal? All right, Rochelle, thank you. Physical activity, absolutely. And we got some of that in question number 1 with the biking and going for a walk and exercise. From Alex, sleep, absolutely. Both enough quantity and quality sleep. So thank you so much. Yep, absolutely. Sleep. Mariella with healthy nutrition, absolutely, which kind of beats us to the punch as far as what we'll be talking about. So we have 2 more. What were the other 2? Social engagement. Great one, Mariella. Thank you. All right. Else. Self-engagement could be part of social engagement. We'll give you partial for that. What was number 5? Stress management. April Reed, thanks for joining us. That's a really great one. Stress management. Okay, so physical activity, healthy nutrition, sleep, stress management, and am I missing one? Physical activity, healthy nutrition, sleep, stress management, and social engagement. There we go. Dr. Ray should probably know those off head by now. All right. So, folks, the reason why I wanted to spend a special session talking about healthy nutrition, number one is we know that this COVID-19 era has had an impact on all of us, and it certainly had an impact on our dietary and physical activity habits, in part because as we think of lockdown and also as we think of availability of going out to eat or ordering in to eat, in one way or another, it's impacted all of us, including our nutrition. And it's so important that we highlight the impact that nutrition has on fundamentally every area of our life. I've spoken in the past about the idea of wellness, not just as a concept or as a thing that we do or even as an activity, but wellness really as a source of energy management and recognizing that we have a finite amount of energy in any given day, and we want to do the best we can every day to use that energy in a way that'll be impactful and meaningful for us. But there are a few things that we have to keep in mind, particularly when we think about healthy nutrition. The first is, here in the United States, we know that the number 1 cause of death is heart disease. We also know that heart disease has a significant connection to the foods and things that we put into our bodies on a daily basis. There's a really great study out of the University of Minnesota that followed some 50,000 people over several years, monitoring and looking at their dietary habits, specifically those that were consuming fast foods. And one of the things that they found was for those who consume fast food 2 or 3 times a week, over time, what they found was a greater than 50% increase in their risk of death from cardiovascular disease. For those who consumed fast food 4 or more times per week, that risk went up to greater than 80% risk of increased mortality from coronary artery disease. And even for those that we would consider to be potentially somewhat moderate or less so, and only consume fast food once or so a week, they still had an increased risk of cardiovascular disease by as much as 20%. So we know when we think about this purely on an epidemiologic standpoint, we know that healthy nutrition has a big impact on our long-term health, has a big impact on our heart health, and a big impact in allowing us to really live the lives that we want to over the long term, particularly in preventing and protecting us from some of the chronic diseases that could have a negative impact on us. The other connection, and I think this idea of nutrition and its impact on our heart and on our overall well-being is something that many can make the connection to, but one that some don't often consider is the impact of our nutrition on our mental health. The impact of our nutrition on mental health. And there have been some really just amazing studies that have helped draw some very clear connections. There was one not too long ago out of the British Journal of Psychiatry that followed some 3,000 or so people over about a decade. And what they found was that individuals who consumed what were considered whole foods, right? So things, diets that were high in whole grains, in non-processed foods and fish, and in some of the great plant-based proteins and others that we'll talk a little bit about here in a minute, these individuals, in comparison to those that had an opposite diet, similar to the first group that we mentioned in the previous study, had a much lower risk overall of depression and a number of other mental health conditions. And so it was really an interesting connection about the impact of our diet on not just our physical health, but our mental health and our overall well-being.